Hello, hello, and good morning. Welcome to Journey to SEA 2025. And I should probably say good afternoon, good evening, and good night as well, just in case you're looking at the recording. Thank you so much for spending your time with me as we talk about narratives, reports, and comprehension. So today we're on to episode 8, and we'll be talking about reported speech and how to go about doing that, why it's useful for reports. And for narratives, we're talking about connecting the ideas in the plot. And with the comprehension, we're focusing on the fiction questions and how students can prepare themselves effectively for answering fiction questions. So I'll be sharing with you a lot of details about these things, as well as talking about some of the resources I have available that would support you and help you with practicing and going through the details as you work toward SEA 2025. So I am Shelley-Ann Edwards Barron, and just in case you're new to the live, let me share just a little bit about myself so that you know what I'm about and what kind of information you'd be getting from me. So I call myself a creative writing specialist simply because I work with creative writing not only from the writer's perspective, but also from the audience's perspective. And that is something that students really do need to understand because they're not writing for themselves, they're writing for someone else, eventually to give them a grade, but for whatever purpose they're writing, whether it's a report or a narrative. And what I've found, especially with children, is that many students don't understand why they need to write and how they're to put things together. They're often just given a prompt and say, okay, respond to this, and then they're given maybe a few details of feedback. And sometimes the feedback doesn't really target the issues that they are having individually. So, coupled with that, we also have the fact that some children find that, the creative writing, everything kind of feels sort of abstract. And so, what they need is something concrete that they could work with, step by step information, guidelines of what to do at each point in writing stories and reports. And so, I created something called the 12-point plot development for narratives, and I created an entire program for report writing so that students could really understand. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And what I do is I focus on something called multisensory learning. Multisensory learning is about making the intangible concepts of writing very practical and active. And so we play games, we go through scientific experiments. We do lots of different things that would help students both feel more engaged with the writing as well as more competent in what they're doing. So that's why I really focus on the creative writing with the multisensory learning. And then when it comes to comprehension, what you'd realize is that comprehension is the other side of the creative writing. So when students are writing, they are the authors, they're the writers, but then when they are doing comprehension, they are the readers receiving information that other people would have written. And so you'd find that the skills that they engage with for the writing is going to support them, those skills will support them with the comprehension as well. So that's why I started going through the comprehension. And as we're talking today, this is episode 8. We're on fiction comprehension, the second round of fiction comprehension. We've already covered foundation concepts and our first look at nonfiction. So if you've missed any of those episodes, you can go back into the archive. You can find them on YouTube or on my Facebook page. That's Word Coach Youth. Just go into Facebook and type in Word Coach Youth, and you'd be able to find that and get the information so you can go back, or you could go to my website, which is wordcoach.com. All right, and on my website as well you'd find access to some other resources. We have some blog articles that would help you. I'm actually going to be sharing a blog article today that mentioned about cause and effect. And as I was going through it, I think I will probably do another one. I haven't written blogs in a bit, so I'd probably start back doing the blogs where I could add in some information and write about the things that we discussed during the sessions, because I realized that the sessions are really meant to guide you, but then you would need materials and additional resources to actually implement some of the things that we're talking about. So I'm in the process of creating quite a lot of that, but I have some already that you can access. And we'll talk about that when we get to the various applicable sessions. So we're getting started today. As I said, indirect speech or reported speech, connecting plot points, and working with fiction questions. So usually I begin with the report writing. So let me get my screen sharing going. What I've decided to do these days in this particular series, I'm going to be sharing some visuals so that you can follow along and be able to find the information. So this is what we're dealing with today. And we're getting started with report writing, working on indirect speech. Now, indirect speech isn't on the list of things that you would see in the requirements for report writing. However, it is an important part, I believe, because it helps the writers, sorry, give details that they may not be otherwise able to give because of the fact that they're trying to be concise and, focus on facts and not give opinions and so on. A lot of the things that you might want to say or that people say in a report can actually be, you know, can come across like the writer's opinion if it's not clearly and carefully crafted in sentences to put in the report. And so with the indirect speech, we really want to first start thinking about the fact that reports really should include what participants say. Now, human beings speak, we use words and we use language. We say things, excuse me, we say things, we have opinions, we have ideas, and sometimes we share these things. Even in situations that we're considering to be a report kind of situation, human beings react to things. And so participants might say things that would be important to reporting what is said and what actually happened in the situation. So let's say we have an incident. Somebody was bullying somebody else, and participants would say things. The bully might tell the victim something, and the child receiving the bullying might respond in a particular way. Teachers tell students things, students respond to teachers. If you have a situation where, let's say, a child was caught cheating, what, there would be a conversation there, things would be said. And so it's not only important for students to report actions, it is also a really good idea for students to report what participants say. And I just reverted to it's so easy to think of the writing as all together. And I just said characters. And this is a good time for me to remind you that in order to keep the style of writing separate, you want to use the different language. So participants would be the people involved in a report, and a character would be someone involved in a story. And we're going to be talking about characters soon when we get to connecting the plot points. But for now, we're working with participants in a report, and we're thinking about what would participants say. And we really do want to include that information in a report. And I have three very strong reasons that I believe are necessary and important for everyone to understand, teachers and students. specifically students, because of course they're the ones who have to write, but teachers and parents, because this is something that needs to be explained to students so that they understand and know why they can do this and how it's possible. So the first point is that it demonstrates the reason we write about what others say in a report is to demonstrate thoughtfulness about details. Now, what I mean by that is what people say can be included, but we don't want to include everything they say because not everything they say might be relevant. The same way, we don't want to outline and explain all the actions that happen in the situation. We're really only focusing on the main actions and what is relevant for the reader to understand the situation as it unfolded. And it's the same with the reported speech and reporting on what they say. Because if you are able to identify what is important in what someone said and how it impacts on the situation and somebody else's understanding of the situation, that demonstrates that you are thinking critically about the situation. And that is an important thing for students to be able to do. First off, they need to understand that participants speak. Second off, they need to understand that not everything a participant says is going to be included. The third thing is that, yes, some of it should be included, and it's another opportunity for the student to demonstrate their ability to select relevant information. That part is on the requirements for the reports. If you have a copy of the holistic rubric, definitely take a look at it. One of the things it says is details are specifically and carefully selected. And so being able to select what characters say, I keep saying characters. Yeah, it's hard. I know. So I understand when students do it. Yeah, when, being able to select what participants say, it's important for students to be selective there, and this is another opportunity, as I said, for them to practice selecting only the relevant and most appropriate details to include. So that's number one. And then the second thing and second reason I say it's important for students to be able to add in reported speech and the indirect speech, it's because they would be able to add in information that otherwise they may not be able to. Let's say, for example, like in last week's session, when we were working on like the formal tone, and I think week before as well, I shared some information, a paragraph, and one of the lines in the paragraph said the teacher was disappointed in the students. Now, to say the teacher was disappointed in the students is for the writer to be able to read the teacher's mind and to understand the details of how the teacher feels if it's reported like that. However, if it's said in such a way that the teacher, and maybe call the teacher's name, I think in that example, the teacher's name was Mr. Henry. Mr. Henry indicated that he was disappointed in the child's behavior, then putting it in that kind of way, which is the example of the reported speech, indirect speech, that allows you to include that information. And that kind of information could be relevant to helping the person reading the report understand why the punishment was the way it was and what actually happened after that. Or it could show how Mr. Henry expressed his disappointment, but he let the kid off the hook. So it shows his judgment, and this could be something that the person who is reading would be able to piece together based on a combination of his actions and words, which would be given in the reported speech. So adding in details, it helps the reader more fully understand what is going on by giving the participants a response, not only in actions, but also with what they say. And many times, what a participant says can have direct bearing on what the report is about. So let's say a teacher gave instructions and the child disobeyed the instructions. Somebody observing needs to be able to report what the instructions were so that there could be a comparison between, okay, this is what somebody else heard and understood as the instructions, but this is what the child did instead. And now we can, compare and see that there's a difference between the two and disparity in, what's happening. So adding in details that would not otherwise be easily included and that could be very well helpful to understanding what happened in the report. Reported speech is often a really good way to do that. And then finally, reported speech makes the report more interesting because it does two things. One, it brings in characters, participants. Yeah, by the end of this session, I'll get it right. You bring in the participants' response and show a more complete reaction as opposed to only what the participant did. And that would give the reader a more rounded view of the actual situation. And as in the example of the, teacher saying that they were disappointed, maybe, in a case of a bullying situation, as I mentioned, what the participants would have said to each other. In the case of a fight, what participants might have said before the fight started. All of these things can make the report much more interesting, as well as have the dual function of completing the picture in the mind of the reader. And so, working on reported speech and really understanding what it is plus how to do it, that's important with the report writing. And so, for an example, direct speech, we know direct speech uses the quotation marks. We have a comma. Most often we use said, and this is how the direct speech is given. This kind of direct speech is used in narratives when a character speaks. In a report, we're not giving the exact words. What we're doing is putting it into our own words as the writer, but keeping the main idea of what was said. And there are different ways to do this depending on if it's a statement or a question and so on. But those are the things that you want to start looking at this week and having students recognize how they're able to do that. Look at what it would show up like in a sample report and look at the language, because if you notice a couple of things with the language, in addition to making changes to put it in the writer's language, we have the word indicated instead of said, because remember the formal tone, we're changing many of the verbs from the simple words to the more formal words. Instead of going back, we have was returning. We have it in past tense. We have am here instead. In the indirect speech, we have was, and we use the word that to set off what was actually said. And we're using classroom instead of class so that um, we could be a little bit more specific and direct with the reporting. And so, what you want to work on this week, so let me just pause the sharing to talk about this week and what the agenda is. Remember, if you're following along, you're hoping to have 3 sessions of practice with report writing, 2 30-minute sessions and an hour session if you can squeeze an hour in sometime over the weekend. Although at this point, 3 to 30-minute sessions can work quite as well. And what you want to do is to make sure students understand a couple of things. One, in the first session, what is indirect speech, what is reported speech. Now, I believe it's called indirect speech now. When I grew up, back in the day, we say that back when I was young, back when I was in primary school, we used to call it reported speech. But I feel like it's called indirect speech now because the idea is that direct and indirect speech are both ways that you could report what someone says. And so the direct speech is more vibrant and active and used in stories, but the indirect speech is more direct to the point, focusing much more on specific details and therefore used in reports. So the idea of saying reported speech can be a little bit ambiguous if you take both as a form of reporting. But you know, it's like stuck in my head with reported speech. So if you're looking for information, look up both indirect speech as well as reported speech and see what information you find. If you want to get some information that's specifically targeted for use in report writing, um, might I recommend my textbook, which is Investigating Facts? The Investigating Facts is all about going through the basics and the foundation skills and concepts for report writing, and it's an excellent resource. And so rather than, trying to figure out what it is and how to, get bits and pieces together, there's an entire section, there's a lesson on reported speech. There's one on keeping language formal. You get some vocabulary words. So yeah, I call it reported speech in the text, right? It's lesson 5. And in addition to an explanation of how to create it, what it is, how to create it, there's a wonderful, exciting activity to help students remember reported speech. And there's an explanation of how to connect the activity with the situation as well. Then there's a worksheet and a reflection so that students can um, really practice what they're doing. And then from there, oh, I don't have the journal. That textbook comes in a package with a journal and a workbook that you can get additional practice activities so students could really practice working out the reported speech. And there's an answer sheet so that they could see if they're doing it effectively. And then the journal, that's for the workbook, and then the journal gives students some report writing practice with the reported speech so that they can begin integrating it into their writing. So if you are looking for some information on that, and of course, the text comes with, sample prompts and different things. We have that for you to really get into the investigating facts. It is excellent for students who are kind of struggling with getting details into their reports and really understanding the kind of information you put into each level, each section of the report. And coupled with that, you might consider the sample booklet. I have a booklet with three reports and 3 narratives, and it includes like a kind of step-by-step breakdown of the report writing information. So, the best thing to do if you're interested in getting materials, send me a message. You can message me. WhatsApp is best because I may or may not be in a class at the time you send your message. So, I'm going to just put my phone number up. So send me a message and I can send you a link so you can find out what other resources I have and you can select which ones you think would work the best for you. Because for the students into Standard 5, I also have a digital series on report writing that goes into each of the different types of reports. You might have heard me speak about it before. That's the 5 reports challenge. So, depending on what level your child is, what they understand, they may need the textbook package or they may need that series. So send me a message and I'll send you the details on that. All right. So for report writing, what are we doing this week? We are Introducing reported speech, indirect speech. We are reviewing whether or not students understand what it is, how to use it, making sure that they know why it's a good idea to include it in a report. And then you really want to spend some time asking students what they think characters, participants, man, thought I had it there. You want to spend some time thinking about, what participants would actually say to each other. Because I've had situations where I ask students, okay, so what's happening in this situation? And they give me information about what the characters are doing, participants, what the participants are doing. Um, but they have no idea about what they are saying. And I guess the reason I'm using characters a lot is because it goes both ways. For dialogue, sometimes students don't even know what characters or participants might be saying in a situation. And so they have no idea whether the direct speech or the indirect speech they're using, they have no idea what to include. So spend some time on that. So in a bullying situation, what would the bully say to the person they are bullying? How would that person respond? What would they say? What would a teacher say if they come onto the scene? What would a prefect say? And so go through things like that and identify what the characters and participants would say. You can do the activity for the report writing and narrative writing because you really want students to start thinking about the whole situation so that they would be able to give many more details and not feel stuck with writing and responding when they have their narratives and their reports to do. And so, if you're not sure where to start or what to do, get a copy of the workbook package with the text. So you get the text with the information, and the workbook and journal actually go through each type of report following a particular prompt and advises and prompts students, you know, what would somebody say in this situation? How can you change that to reported speech? Would you need to include this kind of information? So it's a really comprehensive approach to report writing that includes this sometimes overlooked but very useful skill of reporting what someone says using the indirect speech. So I look forward to hearing from you. You can get a copy of the books, use them. Is really solid foundation because not only does it cover that, we look at facts and opinion, the 5 paragraph report, reported speech, formal language, all those things. So it's a really comprehensive package. That's why it's a package with the text, journal, and workbook. All right, so that is the end of what we're covering for reports. Now let's turn our attention to narrative writing. And this week with the narrative writing, we're looking at we're looking at connecting plot points. Um, so far, we have looked at the 12-point plot. I mentioned that to you about how, that step-by-step approach. And we looked at rising action, started thinking about conflict and so on. And in those discussions, I mentioned about having characters react to stories and react to the conflict and what is the character's response. And the thing with the connecting the plot and the events in the plot and the actions in the plot is really about focusing on the character. And so when you think about it, a story is a whole thing about character reactions. And that's the thing that many times students neglect or they don't understand how to do it effectively. And that's what I cover in my classes. So we go into a lot of detail about this because it works twofold. And when we get to the comprehension, you'd realize how important understanding this is. It's important both for narratives as well as for comprehension. In the case of the narrative, being able to look at the character as the person in the story doing things and having things done to them, experiencing things, we'd realize that the entire story is about a character. Whether the character is human or not, the entire story is about a character. And what makes stories unique in this sense is that when characters respond to what's happening to them, that is the way plot is connected. And so, one of the areas that I often see a very strong disconnection between actions in the story starts right at the beginning, right at the beginning, the very first sentence in a story, and the couple of sentences that follow it. So, the very first sentence in a story, we call that the hook. That sentence is used to get the reader's attention. And what I've seen is that students who are usually told, they're given a list of hooks. This is description, this is that description, use this hook for here and use that hook for there. What happens is that they put their hook, so they have it, and then they begin the story. And so the sentence after the hook quite often feels like it's disconnected, like if it's a whole new beginning and the hook is kind of there standing by itself. The trick to bridging that gap is character reactions. And we're really looking at this whole cause and effect. So the cause would be the reason or the why something happened, and the effect would be the result or the impact of what happened. And so when the character responds, the character is responding and showing the results, but we also need to make sure readers have an idea of why. Why are things happening this particular way? So it's like especially important in the introduction and around the climax. Many students jump from conflict to solution without showing how the solution came about. And if you're understanding the 12-point plot effectively and you have details on that, then you would see that there in that 12 point number 9 is something called intervention. And I have where the flashcards. And this is where I have flashcards on these because I think it's a really good idea to have students working with practical, hands-on, tangible things. So it's not just look at the paper and read it, or have their story or their pencil and whatnot. They have cards that they can use to really, you can quiz them with it. You can use it for refreshing ideas and so on. And this card set comes with a poster plus like video sessions to really help students understand how plot works together. Because many times we look at plot as something in a story. Yeah, we understand we need to have the rising action and all of that. And then we write the story, not recognizing that a more critical, creative focus on plot is going to help us write the story. If you've ever heard teachers say, well, hey, we need to spread the descriptions across the story and not put all in one place, following a plot is going to help you do that if you understand how to do that plot connection between the actions and the response. If you ever hear about, okay, you need to include dialogue, understanding where to put the dialogue and what part of the dialogue to include, because we don't include everything, understanding plot gives you specific places where you can put that. If you've ever heard teachers say, good ideas, but difficult to follow the ideas? Partially that's because plot is not done effectively, and we don't have this why results cause and effect sort of thing happening because the reactions aren't done effectively. So in the plot we have number 9, which is the intervention, and there's an explanation here about the intervention, what it is, and how students can actually get it done in a story. We also have another aspect of the plot that happens quite often. This is point number 4. Notice that it's yellow. Point number 3 is red, and with the 12 point you would see some, so 6 is yellow, 5 is red, and there's a reason for that, because those that are red are the conflicts. So this is a complication. That's what we call the first problem, the complication. And you would see reaction to complication here. That's what comes directly after it. So when we're trying to understand cause and effect in a story, the why and the result, we have to think of a couple of things. How does the character respond? And every response has a few parts. It's not just they do things, they have to feel and they have to say as well. And so, really understanding plot gives that entire process and helps with the step by step. So, what we're working with this week is understanding that whole cause and effect. We want to know, okay, the problem, we have a conflict. What causes the conflict? Where does it come from? It can't just drop out of the sky. And then we have to think about how does the character react? What what is their response like? Does it match the level of the conflict? And so, even in expressing those ideas, you realize that we need to have wording and so match. So, for example, I was chatting with one of my students recently, and the character had discovered a treasure map. And the response to the treasure map discovery was, the character was delighted. Now, that is a very polite way of saying things. But remember, in a story, we want to have emotions and we need to have emotional reactions as well. So, what exactly does it mean to be delighted? What did that look like physically? What did the character do? What did they say? How did they feel? So, delighted is kind of like a summary, and what we want is some specific details so that we can break it down and readers could feel like they're experiencing the response as well, and that they fully understand the whole idea of the escalation of emotions and all of that in the plot. So connecting the ideas in the story, it really students need to pay attention to the whole cause and effect. And I'm going to share a link. Um, I put it in. I might have to go back on YouTube and make sure it's there, but it should show up on the Facebook page where the cause and effect. So this is one of the blogs that I wrote, I think it's like 2020, talking about cause and effect. So I might actually update, like add another article to this sometime later on this term. But to get started with cause and effect and understand cause and effect with stories, this is an excellent place to begin. It'll start kind of framing your ideas with that. And most definitely to keep working with it, I would recommend um, getting this package with the um, flashcards and the poster and the videos, because what I did with that package was to give like video lessons. I think there are like about 4 of them. There's a worksheet, there's an experiment to make the whole thing kind of exciting and interesting for students. But it really does focus on that kind of foundation that helps students understand this cause and effect in stories. And just by way of summary, what creates the cause and effect? Presenting a conflict that readers know where the conflict came from, or at least have a general idea, and then giving the characters reaction to that conflict. So we get a cause of the problem and then we get a reaction to the problem that completes the circuit for cause and effect. So we're working with this idea this week and making sure students get that understanding of cause and effect. And so we're giving definitions, we're giving examples, and so on. If you want to get some sample stories, um, like I said, I have a package with 3 reports and 3 stories. So you can get that one where you get the two together and you could look at cause and effect in those stories so that you could do both things this week. So you have your reports, you have your narratives. So for the reports, you'd be working on the reported speech, and for the narratives, you're working on the whole cause and effect connection. And so, yeah, get a hold of those and really go through it, analyze it, discuss it, and maybe try to emulate some of it to get that whole cause and effect. So, really and truly, you want to understand cause and effect. So, session one, again, just like with reports, 3 sessions. Session one would be what is cause and effect? What does that look like in a narrative? Why is it important to pay attention to that? Session two, how do you achieve the cause? How do you write the cause without saying this is where the problem came from? You don't want to just tell readers. You can have it implied. You can have it, somebody say it in a speech, in, dialogue or something. It doesn't have to be stated by the narrator or the writer directly. It could be integrated into the story. If it is you are interested in working on that and you really want some additional help, then consider perhaps enrolling in one of my courses. So the course that I have now, we're finishing up at the end of the term. I'm going to leave July free because I want to create some more materials that would be available come September, but I would be doing the courses in August. So look out later today or later this week for the ads, and you can check that out because, like I said, these are some foundation concepts that you want to get students really clear on before they start drilling writing. So we don't want to go and drill, 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 and then they're drilling the wrong thing, or they feel overwhelmed because so many things are happening in what they're working on. So definitely cause and effect for a narrative is like a key foundation concept, and you'd really want to get a handle on that. Um, so to practice with cause and effect, you might again look at stories. You can do get some pictures and like a situation. One that I use quite frequently with my students is like, of a little boy riding a bike, and we talk about problems that he could encounter, what the causes of those problems are, what are the consequences of those problems, the outcomes, situations coming from that. I have a worksheet that I do with my students to look at what happens before, what happens after, and that's like the foundation cause and effect situation because you want students to recognize that there's a connection here with um, the programs, with the activities, with the conflict and the response and all those things. It's not just with throwing details at the reader. We have to connected. So somebody is asking about the cost of the materials and the courses. Um, Let me give brief, and if anything, um, send me a WhatsApp message, and I can give you all the full details. We can talk more about that. So the materials, different prices. The sample booklet with the 3 reports, 3 narratives. That one is $50. the I have 5 reports challenge. That's for report writing, details, step by step, samples, plus prompts, plus breakdown and explanations. That one is 135. I have something similar for the narrative writing, which is 7 stories challenge. That is 145. And altogether, I think that's like 12 booklets. It's digital, but they're like 12 booklets. You don't necessarily have to print all of it, but all the details are there. That one actually includes like an understanding of the 12-point plot, so that you can have that information. The flashcards and the poster course, because that comes with, printable materials and other things as well. That one is 245, and you get like a full foundation understanding of the narrative writing. The report writing textbook combination, you get 3 books: textbook, workbook, journal, and it's really a complete course from beginning basic concepts to writing reports. That one is 395 for the package itself. But let me see. Maybe I should put my website has some more information on these. So I'll put the link here. Maybe I should do that. Yeah. I'm gonna put the link up. Right? So it's just pretty much the website slash resources, and then you'd see what is available there, all the details on the prices. For some of them, you'd be able to download material to see what is inside and that type of thing. So wordcoach.com slash resources, and wordcoach is WERDCOACH. So wordcoach.com slash resources, and you would see what's available and what you can have access to. I have more materials on the reports and narratives than I do on comprehension, but I am working on a few more details with comprehension, and that's why I want to take July off of doing courses and programs and so on. I'm still continuing with my one-on-one students, but for the July, I'm not adding any courses. At the end of the term, I would be focusing on creating the materials, because every time I work with a student and I think, yeah, students, I can explain, but what do they need? They need follow up and practice to reinforce the ideas and the concepts. So that's what I want to put some more effort into, that because I'm sure you've noticed by now, I take a slightly different approach to teaching creative writing and teaching comprehension as well. And so I feel like the types of materials that students need, there really isn't enough on the market for that kind of interaction and laser focus. So that's just an idea of what's available now. But definitely, for example, I'm working on a text on poetry and understanding poetry, and I have materials for practicing comprehension, like worksheets with answers. Those are the kinds of things that I'm working on during July, so that come August, I'd be able to release. And certainly for those who are interested in the courses would be, I think, around 900, 950, because they come with materials. So the report writing course would come with the textbook package and the samples. The narrative writing course will come with the poster and the course, and the additional materials, the flashcards, plus some other materials. The comprehension course I'll be offering will come with the ELA answers from 2019 to 2024, and worksheets, at least 3 unique, as in I created worksheets for fiction, nonfiction, graphic, and poetry. So the courses come with the material. So if you want to hold out and do the course in August, it will come inclusive of the materials. But of course, you don't have to take the course to get the materials. You can purchase the materials separately. right? So, speaking of that, let's move on to the comprehension. Today, we're looking at fiction. Let me get my screen up. Mhm. All right. So, today, we're working on the comprehension. So, let me go back out. I'm sharing the wrong page. Um, Yeah, we're looking at fiction comprehension. Are we looking at the questions? Last week we looked at the what you call it, the like what is fiction, how it's different from nonfiction, what areas we're focusing on, and those types of things. And so if you missed last week's episode, go back to that and get the information, the foundation on the fiction so that you can understand the questions and what we're working on now and how to like continue, because what I'm trying to do with this series is for you to have a step by step. So at the end of each live that I do on a Tuesday, you should have action steps for reports, action steps for narratives, action steps for comprehension. What exactly are you studying this week? And what exactly are you putting your attention to this week? And so eventually, yes, I want to make sure and create resources that you could have, that you could work on these things as well. So for comprehension this week, we're focusing on fiction questions. And the number one thing, going back to what I said about narrative writing, is that stories are about characters. And so fiction comprehension is comprehension with stories. So when you're writing stories, we're writing narratives. When we're reading stories, we're reading about the characters and it's a whole thing about responding to a story or responding to a narrative. Because if you check the past papers and you look at the fiction comprehension, you'd realize that they're stories and they're written in pretty much a really close way to what students should be writing for their narratives. So you can study it. If you look, you can actually plot the stories. You can use the 12 point. I've done it. Use the 12 point and plot the stories that are used for the fiction passages. I think 2024 was fiction, 2023 was fiction, 2021 was fiction, I believe. So you can go back and check those. But the whole idea is that a fiction passage is about a character. Stories are all about characters. So guess what? The questions that students are going to get that are unique to fiction passages are all about characters. So students absolutely and thoroughly need to understand characters. They need to do character analysis, they need to do character development, they need to do reactions to characters. All of these things are unique to the fiction. And I say unique because even though poetry, and when we get to poetry, you'll understand that there are some really strong similarities between fiction and poetry. When we get to poetry, it's treated with slightly differently. So while you might have a question on character, it's not the same and it's not as frequent as you would get on, for a fiction passage comprehension. If you don't have a copy of the blank past papers, you can check my website and you can get a copy. I think it's under resources. I'll have to check. But if you want to get a copy and you can't find it, just send me a message. The Ministry of Education has from, I think, 2020, 2021, 22, 23, I believe they have. They don't have 2019. I have a copy of 2019. and they don't have 2024 up yet. I have a copy of 2024, although it's missing the last question. It's missing question 36. What I did was to suggest three options for what question 36 would have been and could have been. And I also offer the answers for sale. That would be 150 for the answers. But if you study those, but really for now you need the blank ones, so you can study the questions. After you've studied the questions, then you go on to studying the responses, which is what we'll be talking about next week, how to respond to to the fiction passage questions. And what you would notice if you study the questions is that you have some standard questions. You have like one or two questions that ask details, like specific things. You have to go to the passage. We call those literal questions. Then you have a question of vocabulary. You would have a question on giving meaning of something. You'd have a question on, I think that's it. So the vocabulary, you have specific words you have to answer questions on, like what they mean. Then you would have like meaning of a phrase or something. You might have a figurative language question or a sensory language question because it's fiction. And then, of course, the detailed questions. But you will always get at least two. I have seen in some cases three questions on characters. You will get at least two questions on characters, and these are the questions that are worth 2 marks. So each of those questions are worth 2 marks, is worth 2 marks. And you'd find that the questions would ask you things like, how does this character feel about the situation? How does this character feel about another character? What do you think the character was thinking? What do you think the author was thinking when they wrote about this? What kind of person do you think this character is? What is the personality? If you were this character, what would you do? Those kinds of things, so focusing on actions and so on. And you would get questions on the character themselves, how other characters react to that character, as well as how you as the reader react to the character. But there are always questions on characters. And yes, we know we have the figurative language and or descriptive language questions, because this is fiction and this is another unique difference between fiction and nonfiction. So it's a passage, but we're targeting different things. And so that's what you want to do this week. Study the questions. Look at how the questions are phrased. Look at what words are used and what each part of the question means. And that's what you want to study with the fiction that you're working on this week for comprehension. So we're not necessarily answering them yet. I know students would be doing stuff at school and so on, but remember, we're working behind the scenes to supplement and support. And so we need to make sure these foundation concepts are clear for students. So what are we doing this week? We are looking at the um, comprehension. What are the unique types of questions for fiction? What exactly do those questions mean? What are they asking for? Look at the different phrasing for similar types of questions and make sure students understand what the examiners are looking for when the students answer the question. So that's what you're working on this week. And so again, 3 sessions. So you might spend 15 to 20 minutes at a time. Doesn't necessarily have to be 30 minutes, but I would allocate 30 minutes once you can, you have the time. 3 instances spread out over the week so that you can really, really focus in on the comprehension questions. We have to understand what the questions are asking before we could even think about framing a response. So take a look at what the questions are asking. And so this week for reports, you're looking at reporting speech, what that looks like in a report, strategies for doing that, why it's necessary. For narratives, We're looking at connecting the plot. So we're looking at cause and effect. What does that look like? Strategies for doing that, responses and conflict and all those things, how that works together. It's a follow on from what we were looking at before when we spoke about rising action. And then with comprehension, we're looking at the fiction questions, paying attention to what the questions are asking, how they are phrased, because you don't want students to look at a question and not be sure, what am I supposed to do here? They need to be able to understand what to do. Next week, we will talk about how to find answers and how to respond to that. So just to close off before I end the session, if it is you're interested in getting any of the materials, you can send me a WhatsApp message. Let me just share my number on the screen again. But certainly, if you want to enroll in a course in a program, um, because the program includes the materials so that you would have everything that you need. In addition to that, I do all my programs online and I record the session so that you get the links to the session recording so that even after you do the session, you can go back and double check and, review. You can run the course again if you think your student isn't grasping it. You have the program that you could do it again and that type of thing. So there is that opportunity there. So you get the materials, you get the discussion and the guidance, you get the recordings, and pretty much you get what you need to ensure that your student, your child, has the foundation that is necessary for them to write really well so that they would hit September feeling confident and knowing what they're about with comprehension, reports, and narratives. So send me a WhatsApp message if you're interested, or check the website for the resources, and the information for the website and the resources are there. And just know that my summer program, the August vacation program, I'm actually doing it in August this year so that by the time we get to it, you would get lots more materials to use and practice with at home. All right. So thank you so very much. That's the end of it for us today. And we've covered quite a lot. You have some work to do. If you want some help with it, reach out, ask me questions. I'm here to answer as many questions as I can because I understand how daunting and distressing the journey to SEA can be. I did it twice with my own kids, albeit the first time I wasn't as involved as the second time. And even then, I was not one of those parents that, got the memo start early. So that's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because I want to say, don't be like me, right? So thank you for spending your time, and go back to the archives, double check the episodes, send me WhatsApp messages with the questions, and I do look forward to interacting with you. All right, have a wonderful rest of the Tuesday, and hopefully I'll see you next week. I'll be here around 11 a.m. ish next week Tuesday as well. All right, bye guys, take care.